Hello and welcome to another episode of Something Rotten. This is the third episode of our very loose series, the first of which was based around the game Indica, the second Hellblade 2, and for the third I said, Blake, I've been playing these two games, I can't stop thinking about them, and maybe they're also related to having some sort of mental illness, perhaps. We're playing The Exit 8 and Platform 8, two games very similar, both released by the developer Kotake Create within the past year, basically, for both of them.
My God, Jacob, we played a lot of rotten games, you might say, that have pushed me mentally and emotionally. However, none until now have pushed me physically. The Exit 8 made me almost throw up. It was pretty rough. So
that's
great
crazy.
job picking games.
You messaged me this yesterday. Has this ever happened to you before with games? Like, how often do you get motion sick?
Never.
Wow.
I mean, I get motion sick kind of free. When I first moved to New York, I couldn't ride. Certain trains have seats that face front and back, and I couldn't sit in any seats that were facing the opposite direction of the train. I've gotten better at it, but they would make me like instantly motion sick. But games, never. Outside of like VR, I'll get like VR stomach. But here's what I think happened. I self-diagnosed. And to be fair, listeners at home, my partner is a doctor, so I feel safe in doing this.
Yeah, you're great at self-diagnosing now.
I drank a lot of coffee on an empty stomach and then played a game with a pretty fierce head bob and was sitting at my computer really close. And I think that's what did me in. I think had I taken care of myself, I might have gotten through it. But I was playing it. I instantly went into a sweat and was like, I'm going to throw up. Then I had to lay in bed for 40 minutes and watch the first game on YouTube.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about that later. I've only got motion sick from... I've got pretty good VR legs, but like sometimes you get in one and you think you're okay, and then you take the helmet off, and I'm like, oh, I'm not okay, and I immediately have to like go lay down.
I will say, I'm sorry, we're really making our guest wait. But on the second game, I turned the head bob off immediately. Zero problems. I was fine.
That's interesting. Okay, well, for our guest that we've been making wait so far, coming to us from Oddity Roadshow. A One Piece podcast, which I actually didn't know you were on until just now.
Hold on, to be clear, a one-person podcast or the manga One Piece? One Piece you can understand my confusion.
The manga One Piece. I'm on a special miniseries called Fight Together, where we cover like more serious topics than the regular show.
Cool.
Shannon Strucci is here. Hi, Shannon. Thank you for coming.
I'm excited to be here. I love video games.
Thank you.
That makes one of us. On this podcast.
I love some video games.
That also makes one of us.
Shannon, you are probably not aware of this, but Blake and I's shared history is that we were both interns at Game Informer magazine long ago, and that's kind of how we got to know each other, although we were interns at different times. But that is also, I bring it up to say that when I was working there, it was like a summer. They didn't really have enough stuff for me to like fill a full day. And so a lot of times I was just sitting there watching videos or whatever. And that is when your Fake Friends Part 2, which I think is probably your kind of highest profile work, this sprawling video on parasocial relationships, came out. And I remember sitting in the Game Informer offices watching that video and kind of like turning to the people around me who were also interns and being like, you guys gotta watch this shit. This is blowing my mind.
Oh wow, that's cool. God, that was like 6 years ago.
Yeah, not to make you feel old. We've all been doing this for a long time, but it was certainly kind of the first Shannon Strucci content that I saw, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's still I've worked anonymously like in the A on much higher profile stuff just as like an editor. But that is the thing that I did that the most people have seen. And also credit to me because I did some work with H-Bomber Guy and people always forget that I worked on it. Whatever. But which we address in one of the videos and people still forget. But yeah, Fake Friends 2, it was like I spent years researching it and about a year editing it. And putting videos out it feels kind of like putting something into the void. Yeah. And I never really made it as a video essayist. So it's cool when I find out it had an impact on someone.
I mean,
it's still really cool to me.
And not only, it's like I thought it was a great video. I love watching it, but also I feel like it was like, obviously you had been doing research about it, so people had been talking about it previously, but certainly from my non-academic perspective, that was kind of the inflection point for people starting to use parasocial as a term. You know, it's like now it is something that we all talk about all the time, but like I certainly was not familiar with kind of that that phrase and that meaning before your video, and then it was like you and Lindsay Ellis and then PhilosophyTube all had videos on it within like a fairly short period of time, and suddenly it was just like a thing that everyone knew.
It's really weird. It was really weird for me too, because I'll see it pop up when I'm not expecting it. Like I was watching the Try Guys, not apology video, but it's like the other Try Guys were like talking about it, and they start talking about parasocial relationships. I was like, this is weird. It got not out of hand, but to say something, and the video doesn't have that many views. It has like 200,000 views or something, but I think people springboarded off of that. Yeah, because it's a term from the 50s. It's an academic term but no, it was because like a friend of mine, an online friend, was telling me they were trying to cut back on parasocial content, like Red Letter Media and whatever. They were starting to feel like, I'm too invested in this. This is uncomfortable. And I said, what does that mean? And that was like 2016. And then it just started. It changed the direction of my life.
And then you realize, like,
significantly.
Oh, wait, I know exactly what this means. I just didn't have a term for it until now.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It was weird.
I feel that way sometimes, where it's like, it's weird to make something that then people kind of associate you with, even though it's like a broader, like, whenever, it seems like once every 3 months, some Twitter account called like classics important, you know, like Western civilization, will make a tweet about how like Rothko sucks, and then like inevitably 7 different people will be like, have you watched this Jacob Geller on Rothko? And I'm like, a lot of people talked about Rothko before me. I didn't mean to be the Rothko guy.
You can't control when it happens. That's to anyone who's starting to make videos. Put your best foot forward on all of them, because you never know what people will obsess over and repost and stuff.
Blake, do you feel like you have... Is there a thing that people associate with the Blake Hester brand?
Yeah. So for a long time, I felt like fairly anonymous. Like I worked but I was like a long form writer, and no one fucking reads long form. And I never put my opinions online. So I was like just kind of this enigma. And then I started hosting a podcast with Jacob Geller. And I'm not comparing myself to the level of popularity Jacob has, but I've definitely been like, oh, people like now know more about me than I know about them, and they have an email address to tell me things.
And don't make assumptions about like, this is a Blake game, this is, this feels like Blake core.
It's definitely been one of those things where it's like, and I'm fairly open, like I'll reply to most tweets people send at me if they're nice and read all the emails, but they're very much like, a few months into SR was a moment where I was like, oh, it's different. It's different.
You're
now.
welcome.
It's a little different.
That's my gift to you.
You might have noticed I didn't say thank you.
So Shannon, your kind of personal output, notwithstanding stuff that you've worked on for other people, is not particularly game focused. But I've seen you tweet about games before. You certainly seem like you are someone who plays video games. But like, what kind of space do they occupy in your life? You know, do you think of yourself as someone who is like a kind of hobbyist, or is it more intense in the way that it is for kind of Blake and I? How do you see yourself as a gamer?
I used to play more games. Over the past couple of years, my workload got way too intense. It's better now. I had to try to figure out a better work-life balance. I don't play a lot of AAA games. I never really played a lot of AAA games. Not when I was like 10 or whatever. I was playing Spyro the Dragon, which I guess
as
was
AAA
like
as they come, baby.
Yeah, God, I love those games. But yeah, I mostly just will see kind of what sounds interesting with my friends, or I'll just ask on Twitter. Either like I have some group chats with like real life friends, or I'll ask on Twitter like, what's good on Switch or on Game Pass. Like I recently played Inscription for the first time because a lot of
Oh
people I
yeah,
really
really cool game.
respect like that one. I'm playing New Vegas after a while. I played Fallout 4 when it came out, but like I'm really into New Vegas right now. Probably the Zelda games are the only AAA games where I'm like I have to play this, the mainline Zelda. But I mostly pre-work that I had over COVID, I would just download a ton of horror games off of itch.io, like the haunted PS1 games.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly just like weird indie stuff. I just find it more interesting. Or like now I'm playing the Alan Wake games, or trying to get through those and Control and Alan Wake 2. But not being used to AAA stuff, some of it in the first game, I'm like, okay. Like like one of my favorite games is Deadly Premonition. I prefer sort of like outsider art, really
Our
janky,
listeners are
goofy
going
stuff.
to love you. They have been telling us to play
Yeah.
Deadly Premonition for a long time.
Oh wow. There's nothing like it. Not to get on a whole side tangent, but it's like Twin Peaks through the eyes of like a really deranged Japanese man who does it. There's a lot of Japanese cultural stuff in it.
Yeah.
Like cultural tropes with Western horror, and it's sort of beautiful and broken. Don't play, well, the sequel is not good, but the first game, the sequel's very like accidentally racist because it's set in the South and it's more broken. But yeah, the first game is really good. But yeah, I love Silent Hill 2 is my favorite game growing up.
Hey.
I like point and click adventure games, stuff like that.
I promise that listeners of Something Rotten, I did not prompt Shannon to bring up any of these games. You were just like, as a matter of course, putting yourself very much in the canon of Something Rotten games.
Awesome.
Just last night, my partner, who's been like, because of her gamer boyfriend, she's been gaming more. She's been playing through the Remedy games, and I was like, you got to play this fucking game, Silent Hill 2. You ain't gonna believe this shit. And I forgot, like, Silent Hill is obtuse even when you play games for a living, and having to explain to her, like when she first started controlling it, and be like, oh, so this is this thing called tank controls.
Oh no.
Right.
Where you move relative to the camera, but don't think about it that way, kind of, was a nightmare. And then she'd be like, well, how do I play? I was like, well, the game's not going to tell you. So good luck. And she loves it, but it's funny you brought that up because I was watching it last night. Watching someone play Silent Hill 2 when you know what to do is kind of a mind-numbing experience because it's like, I don't, just hit him, you know, like just hit the guy.
It's really, yeah, and it's like, I don't know how much, if I was watching someone play Silent Hill 2, I think I would mostly be like, here's how you do this puzzle. Like, is your experience gonna be way better if you're like wandering around trying to figure out that you need to like drop the fruit packet on top of the thing in the mail shaft?
Dude, she got that one immediately.
Wow.
But the main thing I'm telling her is like, just go to the third floor of the apartment. There's a key up there. Just don't even explore. Just go to the third floor. But she's on the easy puzzle difficulty, which I think is the way to play it because it's not worth slamming your head against
No,
the
they're
wall
not
on
good.
those.
But it's my favorite game of all time. I've been playing it for like 20 years. What's the one puzzle where there's like something in the floor and you have to like melt wax to get it? It's just like stupid.
Oh,
in the hospital.
In the prison, you make the handle. Oh, yeah. No, the prison.
The handle
prison.
with like, I don't know. It's the most counterintuitive. And then there's like the scene in the empty pool with the baby carriage where you get the snake coin.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing?
There's the thing where you find like a fish hook in a teddy bear, and then you have to like attach it to something and go down. And it's like, I like conceptually thinking about all those things. Like it's kind of fun to be like, oh, and James had to do this really fucked up thing, but for like me to do it, like how was I supposed to know?
Yeah, dude, watching someone play it is frustrating, not in a like user error sense. Like I'm not like, Sam, just get your shit together. Watching it, I'm like, it's a miracle this game is good. Because you watch someone else play it and it's like, this looks miserable.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus. But the game is the best game of all time.
This is a complete departure, but I do just want to note that I'm trying to think of other guests, and I'm not sure if we've got any. This might be our all Southerner podcast for one of the first times, because Shannon, you're in Atlanta, I'm in North Carolina, and Blake currently in New York, but is a Kentucky boy.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Are you from Atlanta?
Yeah, my family is super Southern.
Hell
like my history is like really. I have relatives from Harlan County, Kentucky, and my family is like from Alabama and Tennessee. Yeah.
Blake gave a hell yeah to your family being super Southern, and then drew back a little.
I don't know. Maybe it's a hell yeah. I'm not sure.
No, I mean, that's something I've come to terms with as I've gotten older, because I have so many more friends from New York and LA and stuff, is more embracing the good aspects of, because it's the only, like, I'm Sicilian, but I'm not culturally Sicilian at all. Like, I don't have any kind of connection to that. Where so it's like being Southern is my only like cultural identity, and I don't want to just reject it because some of it really sucks. A lot of it's really, especially Atlanta is really cool. Like, not that the rest of the South sucks, but like Atlanta is awesome. So
yeah, I mean, I'm from Louisville, which is like very similar. It's like I'm not a lot of Kentucky doesn't truly resonate with me, but I think as I've lived away from the South, it actually has made me appreciate all the good in the South more. Like I feel more
like for
attached to it
instance
now
in
that I
New
don't
York
live
they
there.
don't have Cookout, the best fast food restaurant, and I know they got Cookout in Atlanta.
That's true.
Yeah. The cars lined up down the road.
I would like to point out how much closer Jacob and I have become as friends, because when Jacob and I first started talking, he used to refute the idea that I was from the South until I proved him wrong with facts and logic, and now he readily admits I am in fact from the South.
I look, I think of you as a Southerner. I think Kentucky is kind of a gray area. It just
I'm on the border. The Ohio River is the border, dude. So it's like I grew up in Louisville, but right across that river, Jeffersonville, that's the Midwest. And even though you live further south than me, I think I'm more of a Southerner than you. I just got it more in my blood.
No true
I'm just
Southerner.
more of yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the games that we're talking about today. So, Shannon, you said that you are like a big horror kind of indie fan. Have you, first of all, actually, before we start, have you played Kitty Horror Show's Anatomy?
No, a lot of people have told me to play it. It's on my list.
That's one that we played that I think of as kind of like the itch.io horror game, which also Blake and I recently were like, yeah, that was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, was play that game. But anyway, were you familiar with these games before I asked you to come on? Because they developed a following pretty quickly, but not in kind of the same sphere as like the Haunted PS1 game type things.
No, I wasn't. I don't really follow the like backrooms subculture type stuff, which are like SPC, like the SCP type stuff. So I was not familiar with these at all.
Blake, had you seen them? I mean, I know I had talked about them, but
on YouTube, yeah, I'd seen like thumbnails of people, and I think Kotaku maybe had an article about it. But I was like vaguely familiar, but like I didn't mechanically know what the game was. I just knew there was a horror game that took place in a subway station. I had no clue there was a sequel. That one was
the sequel came out like 2 weeks ago, and so it's very new.
Exit 8 is the first one. No, Platform 8 is the first one.
No, Exit 8 is the first one. Platform 8 is the second one.
Okay, I was familiar with Exit 8, but it was a trip figuring out what the game actually was.
Yeah, so I first heard of this, I think actually Aftermath wrote an article about it. And I think I like saw the headline, which was something like, 20-minute horror game, really cool. And I was like, great, I don't even need to read the article. I want to go in kind of blind. And
I refute that 20 minutes.
Yeah, it depends. And I think I first... I'm with you, Shannon, in that like I think the idea of the backrooms, just kind of in general, is fun. I think the lore building around it, which is really popular, makes it less fun. Like the more details people write about this, the less I'm interested in it.
The moment Slender Man became more than shitty pictures on DeviantArt, stopped being cool. And Backrooms is the same way, where it's like, don't tell me what the fucking Backrooms are. I don't give a shit. They're just creepy because they look creepy.
Yeah, it's like, I like it as a creative writing exercise, sure. But like, yeah, they're not spooky. And so I think when I first saw, like, okay, it's a game about, like, finding anomalies and, liminal space is kind of a thing, I was a little worried that it was going to be, I don't know, a little up its own ass, basically. But like, I very quickly, when I started playing it, I realized that I think what's most impressive, at least about the first one, is like how subtle it is all the time, and I really locked in very quickly in like realizing that the game was underplaying itself more often than not, and so then like the big moments kind of pop out more. But like I was skeptical, and then very quickly found a lot of respect for it, just in terms of like how minimal it is.
Yeah, I fuck with it conceptually. I think in practice, me getting motion sick notwithstanding, I really love the idea mechanically or conceptually. I think 45 minutes into this thing, when I'm like, God damn it, they sent me back to 0 again because I didn't see the fucking little face on one poster change. A bit frustrating, but I think there are some like genuinely really, really good scares in both of these. The fucking dude standing disguised as the wall got my ass.
Yeah,
it got my ass in a way few things do.
Shannon, tell us your first reaction, and then I guess we should actually talk about just like what the loop of the game is.
I really liked it. I also got a little motion sick, but then I don't know why I felt better. I struggle with VR games, and when I played the Half-Life games in like 2010. I think there were times with that where I felt a little bit motion sick, but for some reason, I think as I got into it, psychologically, it went away for some reason. Yeah, I really liked it. The scare where there's a woman peeking with the door just slightly ajar freaked me out. Some of the more subtle ones.
I didn't see that. That's cool.
There's one, it's like I was looking at the Steam reviews after I had beat it once, and one of the reviews is just like white woman jump scare, and it's referring to that one because there's like a creepy lady there. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree too. Some of them are too subtle to where I beat it once, read some reviews, got a couple of hints, and then eventually was like, I just have to look these up. I'm never gonna see, like you said, the like the stain on the ceiling or the poster face changing or the really subtle ones. I'm like, I don't have time.
The faces and the tiles. It's like
I saw that one. I was proud of myself.
Yeah,
like pattern recognition, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, I really liked it. It got really once you beat it once, the tension's kind of gone. Yeah. But I think it was very creative, a really good use of a simple premise. And some of the when the briefcase man is walking at you really fast, that one scared me.
Very good. That or when he's super tall.
Yeah, there were a lot of them where you just sort of turn the corner, you see something, and it's like and then you leave. Yeah. I didn't realize I could run at first. I didn't realize the controls, so I kept dying by the red water because I couldn't run away fast enough. Because I didn't realize like right click was run in this game.
I feel like, Jacob, just so you know, I gave it a real college try. I played for like 45 minutes. So when I finally watched a YouTube video, I was like, oh, I saw everything. I just didn't get the last one. Mm-hmm. Which was kind of similar with the sequel, where my partner was like, I want to play this instead. And I had to watch her finish it, but she did it first try. And I was like, that's crazy.
Well, so yeah, the sequel works differently. But we'll talk about it. So the Exit 8, the way that it works is you are in a just literally just kind of like a square of a subway station loop where you start in a tiled hallway, you turn right, you walk down a hallway, and a guy walks past you, you turn left, and then you turn right again, and you're in that same hallway, and you just do it over and over.
And it's the greatest looking video game of all time because it's one hallway.
The instructions on the wall say, if everything's normal, keep walking. If you see an anomaly, turn around. And so basically, it's like if anything's different in the scene, just turn around and walk the other way, and then the hallway that you walk back through becomes the way forward. So you're just kind of like endlessly walking through this thing. I feel like something that we need to talk about is Shannon, how familiar are you with PT?
Oh, I played it.
Okay. Yeah, so
Let's Play when it came out, and I've played it.
I feel like this is one of the most PT games ever made. But also, I think unlike there are a lot of PT imitators if you're just kind of looking around, like, you know, the indie horror scene. I think that it is really impressive how it develops its own identity within it, where PT, obviously, playable teaser for Kojima's Silent Hills, the game that never came out, but was also a game where you just walked through one hallway again and again. And, like, it's very cool to me that is almost a genre now of just like a game where
Yeah.
you walk down a
Mhm.
hallway.
And I think the first game, the second game, not so much, but like the first game, what it does similar to PT, which I think a lot of PT imitators miss, is like a lot of the scares are really smart and effective. They're not just like shitty jump scares or like a creepy little girl like the sequel, which is, you know, a lot of cheap jump scares on a little girl. But I was like genuinely impressed with a lot of scares in this first game in a way that like made it feel smart in the way PT was.
Yeah, so as you kind of walk, you start. I mean, I think, and I will defend, and I have defended. I made a Nebula video that was talking about some of this, but like I think the subtleness of some of them is necessary to the mindset that the game will eventually get you in. But it is still true. It's like some of them are really obvious, where you're walking down and the guy walking, you know, opposite to you, as Blake said, is huge. And it's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, that's obviously different. Or like the lights turn out, or there's like a flood of like red blood or something that's kind of coming down the hallway, and so you turn around and run the other way. But a lot of them are also like exceptionally subtle, where they are, you know, the one there, yeah, staying on the ceiling is a big one. There's one for me where the security, there's a thing that says like you're being watched by a camera, and it's like a graphic that has like two eyes, and like the eyes will look at you is one of them, but it's like it's really, if you don't stand and notice it, it's really subtle. And for me, what this did, because it's like I beat it and then I was like, I'm gonna go back through, I'm gonna find all of them, because after you beat it, it says like, hey, you have like 10 left or whatever that you have to correctly identify. And like looking for those last three makes you feel like you are truly going insane, because like I don't know how, you know, Blake, I know you've talked about having actual diagnosed OCD on this podcast before, but like the feeling of like I have a bad vibe, I feel like something isn't right, and the only way that I can like confirm that or not is like staring at each of these posters and like the floor tiles and the ceiling and everything. Like it really is, it's a really interesting feeling of paranoia, where you don't feel like something is going to like jump out at you, but instead it's just like the world is bad in some ambiguous way, and you need to like figure out how. Really got to me.
It's probably closer to schizophrenia than OCD.
Yes, I think so. But like, you know, the checking every poster every time, very much like I got into a ritual where I was like, okay, these five are good, these five are not.
Did they bring you any peace when they were fine?
I No, I was actually more relieved when I found something bad. You know, because then I was like, oh, I know. You know, there's like
No.
finally confirmation that I wasn't wrong, that I was like seeing something.
Yeah, this is schizophrenia, not OCD in this game. But I think in a way that is kind of the pitch of this game, which if we're tying it into the season is like it seems to easily lend itself to like a mental illness simulator like Hellblade does. I don't know that it, but and when I was playing the game, I was like, oh, I see Jacob's connection here. I don't know if it's intentional or not, which I think is kind of an interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah, it's like I don't know if it's, well, Shannon, was this something that you were, did you feel like you were losing your mind in one way or another while playing this?
I did. Like, it's a mixture of getting really frustrated and having fun. Because the way it's set up, there's like a poster on the wall, and every time you succeed, the number goes up from 0. So you know if you, it's like you're waiting to turn that last corner and see the poster and find out if you just like screwed yourself or not. So that tension was kind of fun. Um, I am a little bit OCD, like diagnosed when I was younger, but I'm like 100% super ADHD, and I have bad short-term memory. So after a certain point, I was just running the loop, frustrated. Like I'll see something or not. And it reminded me of in Silent Hill 2, there's a segment in the sewers where you're kind of running around and Pyramid Head is there. And I remember one time when I was playing it as like a teenager, I got lost and I just kept looping past Pyramid Head, and it started to get funny because I wasn't scared anymore. It kind of broke, you know, because I'm like, I'm just trying to get out. I'm not really in any danger, evidently. And it reminded me of that because I was just running. And of course, if I'm running, I'm not really, but hoping to trigger a more obvious anomaly before I just kind of gave up and looked them up. But overall, I really did enjoy it. But there was a moment of the ones that are so subtle. If you're walking at a normal speed in it, you don't really have any chance to catch them unless you're checking every single.
No,
I would check everything, and then I would miss that like the doorknob had moved, stuff like that. I was looking in the wrong direction. Those were so frustrating, but it was fun.
You know, the thing that I kind of, it is both frustrating and but then like leads into the feel of the game is, it's like, it's so, you know, it's so subtle, but then when you find one of those things, you're like, oh, I didn't even know that was something that I had to be worried about. You know, like, I thought that it was going to be, like, the signs and the guy and the lights. And, like, that's what I had to check every time. And then you see the doorknob moves, and you're like, now fucking every time I walk through, I also have to look at the doorknob to make sure it's in the same place.
Yeah.
I mean, and I want to say, I was kind of, like, you know... using lost your mind in like a funny way, but I don't mean to make fun of you know, people experiencing schizophrenia or paranoid delusions or whatever. And what I talked about in the Nebula video that I made about this is, have either of you ever read about gang stalking? Like
I got recommended TikToks from a guy who was convinced he was being gang stalked.
Blake,
I guess it's like a
do you know
TikTok
about this?
subgenre.
I've encountered it in New York, yes.
You've been gang stalked, or you've met people?
Yeah, very early into me. Maybe I won't include this on the show, but like very early into AJ and me living here, this woman came up to us on the subway. I was like, I don't appreciate you and your associates following me, and that was like how I learned about it.
Oh my God.
I'm not gonna include that in the episode, but for a clean cut, yeah, Jacob, I've heard of it.
So basically the idea is people who have a very specific kind of paranoia where they basically think that they are not just being stalked in kind of a traditional way by one person, but like there is kind of a grand conspiracy to just mess with them in sort of indefinable ways. And so it's like, if you're driving in traffic and some guy cuts you off, that's not just like an asshole, that's like part of the conspiracy to like get inside your head, mess with your life, do all this sort of things. And like playing this, I started to kind of have the feeling of like, I bet this is not dissimilar, where you like see a weird doorknob and you're like, someone did that because of me, you know, like because they knew I would see it and I would like get scared by it, and that's why they moved that doorknob. And so it is Blake, I agree with you. I have no idea if this is intentional, because this is a very good just kind of like Twitch horror game. I bet it would be fun to watch Markiplier like play this. But it does really like, the ability of a game to put you in a mindset, I think, is a pretty powerful thing. And like, it really is doing it. Like it's making you think about this environment in a certain kind of way.
I agree. And like, I think on loop 1, whatever the first loop you realize you really have to memorize this hallway is, you're like, I'm never going to be able to remember anything. By loop 50, you're like, I know every fucking centimeter, which is really impressive. And I think like one of the things that brings the sequel down is like it feels a lot less subtle in a lot of ways. But yeah, like by loop 50, it's like you are just like, it so well, but you also feel like you're a fool going through this thing, checking the same fucking dog grooming poster or whatever. And it's like, that fucking dog poster never changed that I know of.
Yeah, like there are things that you expect are going to be something, and they're not, and then it's like, and then you just look at them every time and you feel like an idiot.
The amount of times I checked the part-time work poster in there, there's a little cartoon lady. It's like, do you want a part-time job? And it never changed. And I finally got too sick to play the game and watched a playthrough of it. And it was like one of the first anomalies was that poster change. I was like, I bet I missed it 100 fucking times, because it's like just the little face changes. it's maddening playing this game in a way that I think is great. I'm not sure it has anything deeper to say. It'd be interesting to know, but the Wikipedia doesn't say
I
so
think
much.
I think it does, perhaps, but it not made with that intention. Like it was talking to me.
Sure.
But yeah, there is a little information on the development of this. I mean, part of what's hard is it is like a Japanese studio, and so a lot of the like interviews and whatever that they've done have been in Japanese, but they talk about on Japanese Wikipedia being inspired by liminal spaces, PT, the back rooms. One interesting one, Blake.
12 minutes.
Did you see this? 12 minutes. Shannon,
12 minutes Defender has logged on.
Did you ever
Good
play
game.
12 minutes?
I'm not familiar with 12 minutes. I will Google it on my phone as we talk about it.
So 12 minutes was a game made by, it's Annapurna, right? It's an Annapurna game. It's got weirdly big voice talent. It's like Daisy Ridley and Willem Dafoe or something are in the game. And it's a time loop game where you that is, believe it or not, 12 minutes long. Where like you're with your partner, and then like a cop breaks into your house and like shoots you, and then that happens over and over, but you can do different things, and as you do different things you're kind of uncovering more of the story and whatever. And the thing that people talk about with that game is it has a kind of crazy twist at the end. An old boy-esque twist at the end that kind of colors the rest of the experience for everyone. But I think, Blake, you're not a defender of that twist specifically, but just like the game as a whole. I think the game is good. The twist is, I don't not as it's just
affronting.
Yeah,
it's not as affronting to me as maybe other people, but yeah, I thought that game was really conceptually very cool. A little frustrating, and this is not a 12 minutes podcast, but I wanted it to be more of an immersive sim than it actually is. It's actually quite linear.
It's kind of like a point and click adventure.
Yeah.
Here's something that I wanted to ask you, Blake. Have been in subway stations in Japan? Do they look like this?
Many. Yes. Yes. I mean, not all of them, right? Like there are different subways, but especially compared to New York, where it feels like you're going to die in an underground collapse in even the nicest subway. Yeah, they are remarkably clean, if quite a bit sterile at times. Yeah.
And it's
They're
certainly
nice. They take care of their systems.
It reminded me of when we were playing Silent Hill 3. Shannon, Silent Hill 3, I assume you have played if Silent Hill 2 is your favorite game?
I actually haven't.
Well, it's not as
played
good.
One and a bunch of the spin-offs, yeah.
3 is modeled after a New York subway that I believe is in Jacob's Ladder, but occasionally I end up in that subway. I don't remember which stop it is, but I'm like, oh my god, I'm in the Silent Hill 3 subway.
When you're in that subway, you actually realize that everything is just a dream in your dying mind.
Yeah.
But Silent Hill,
to you.
Honestly, it's like, I think one of the most memorable sections of Silent Hill 3 is you are just running through this big empty subway station, and it's not looping in the same way, but it is like, before liminal space became just kind of term for any hazy photo, of like a place that you went when you were 10 years old.
A beige hotel.
Yeah. I think that like a subway station is a pretty damn good example of a liminal space. Like it is literally a space built for passing through.
I think I'm not a world traveler, but I do think one thing, at least in the subways I've been to, kind of unique to Japanese subways, is you can get lost in a lot of the big ones in a way that like New York is pretty like, here you go. But the Shinjuku station, which is like the busiest train station in the world, I've just been like mercilessly lost in, and I don't speak the language, so I can't ever ask for help to get out. And it does feel like this game sometimes where you're just like, dude, I've been down this fucking hallway so many times and I cannot find the exit, which I liked. I thought that was a fun touch.
And I do like the idea of there being that like walking man is such kind of a cool touch, both because it like it makes it feel a little less like it's just an environment that someone built in like Unity or whatever, but also like that it's like, well, you can't ask him for help, he's part of it, you know, like I saw him get big that one time, so like he's off limits. Okay, so this game came out, it was a pretty big hit. Lots of videos about it on YouTube, Let's Players playing it. Actually, a number of imitators of this game came out. Like there are similar anomaly finding games that are kind of modeled after it. And then just a couple weeks ago, the second game called The Platform 8 came out, which is less similar than I expected it was going to be. Like when I heard that there was a sequel coming out, especially within like 8 months of the original, I assumed it would just be a different environment, same deal, you know, of like turn around if you see a bad thing, you know, and do it the same. And it actually does away with like the primary game mechanic of the Exit 8, which is that like no longer is it asking you to find things and turn back if you see them, which conceptually I think is pretty interesting, that they didn't just find a formula that worked and repeat it. But I think that it kind of reveals that that was the hook of the first game, because I don't think the Platform 8 hits the same way.
I also think like the train car limits them in a way, just having 1 3/4 hallways. Like there was at least a turn you could make.
Yeah.
And there could be like little surprises. But like everything has to basically fit into the train car or the immediate outside in a way that I think it's like, oh, this is little girl number 2 scare. You know, she's gonna be out the window, or she's gonna move when the lights are off, which is just like a bunch of scares in this game. Or it's like there's going to be a guy without his head, and that's going to be really scary, but he's just going to walk slowly towards you. Like there's never like the element of surprise, or there is, but it's not as like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like I think limiting itself to one train car actually kind of works against it.
Yeah, the turn, you realize it's like in a game with this few elements, the turn is really important, because especially seeing like, is the number going to be 1 higher or is it going to have reset to 0, is like the central tension of the first game.
I mean, like the direct comparison is PT, which is a game built around that first right turn.
Yeah.
Like there's a famous jump scare in it where you're looking at a cracked door and a face pops out and closes the door. And it's like, that's a loud noise. But the scariest thing that ever happens in that game is when you turn a corner and there's just a lady standing there. And that is like, that's the strongest hook of the first game, is you have to turn so many fucking corners, and sometimes shit's going to be a little wacky when you turn that corner and you're like, ooga booga, that's scary. It just doesn't work the same in a train car. Like, I don't care that there are blurry people in a train car and I have to walk through them. The same way I turn a corner and there's 2 guys just standing there is going to scare me.
Yeah, and I don't want to write off the game completely, because there are actually a number of things that I think it does. It is really cool. But Shannon, how about in context of or like relevant to the first game, did you feel, you know, about parallel? Did you like it less like us or more?
I liked it a lot less. One issue I had with it that I don't think y'all mentioned is like, it's hard to know how much ability I have to interact with the environment. So then it became frustrating for me to try to solve puzzles. Like the mannequin puzzle where you have to sit down. I like didn't realize at first I could sit down, or other things. Like some entities, anomalies, you have to look at them. Some you shouldn't look at them. Maybe there's some Japanese cultural stuff I'm missing with those, but it's very not intuitive. And I got the bad ending and spent several minutes wandering around in the bad ending. And I was like,
oh wait,
this
is that
just
the
kinda
one where
frustrating.
the doors open and it's mist? And
Yeah,
then you
I'm like,
get
I'll go
out?
outside. Because there are other puzzles where you have to go outside, like go into other like connected train cars. where they're like spooky people to solve it. I just felt like in the first one, all you do is loop. You can either run or walk, but in this one, I felt so frustrated because like I don't even understand on what parameters I can interact with this world to solve the puzzles. And then they're not, like Blake was saying, it's kind of more cliched horror tropes. It's a little bit less interesting. There were some ideas in it I liked, but overall, I think I was just sort of this one. I played it for a little bit. I think I got the bad ending, and then I just cheated. I just like looked up how to beat it and didn't even try. The first one, I beat it on my own. The first, like I was like, I'm gonna do this whole thing by myself at least once. It took me about 20 or 30 minutes, and then I started looking stuff up. But this one I was like, I'm not enjoying this as much.
Yeah, I think it is. It is interesting that this is more of a puzzle game in kind of a weird way, where the first one, it was just a binary. It was just like, do you walk or do you turn around? And in this, there are a lot of situations because it does not have the, like, there's always something weird, or almost always something weird. And so it doesn't have the, like, hey, look around, see if something's weird. And so instead it is like, yeah, there's a monster that shows up, figure out what to do with them, which makes it feel more video gamey, I think, in kind of a negative way, where it's like you have to figure out the mechanic rather than just like seeing that something is different and then turning around and running back.
I'm watching the endings. We got the good ending. So what happened is I played this for like 30 minutes and I got frustrated, and then my girlfriend said, I want to play, and then she fucking beat the shit out of this game. She loved it.
Well,
so
okay,
much.
so there are three endings.
Yeah. She got the good ending, which effectively is you go to, I don't know, heaven. Like it just gets really bright in the train car and you walk
I got that
into
one at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, you just like walk into a white light and then the game ends, which is pretty similar to the ending of the first game, Exit 8. And then the true ending
That's
is
right,
cool.
which I got.
You get off at a train platform, then you go to exit the station, and you end up in Exit 8.
Yes. Yeah, so it's actually,
cool.
it leads into the first game, where you get off the subway, you walk up the stairs, and suddenly you're in that hallway. And when I realized, like, what was happening there, I was like, oh, it was a...
That's really good. And then the secret ending, you basically get out, and it's Silent Hill, and this is cool.
I think that's the one that Shannon got. The bad one. But so
you just wander in the fog and then realize the game is over and turn it off and turn it back on. You can't leave or do anything.
So
it was spooky.
I do want to. It's like there are a number of things that I think the game. I still think it really has its moments, because the kind of what happens in this more often is you will be walking and something weird will happen, and then like the signs on the above the doors that are normally like, hey, here's what station you're going to, will like flash instructions at you. And often those instructions are like very scary to follow. And so like one of my favorites is you're walking and you see the sign and it says don't turn around. And then like when that happens, you start hearing like loud footsteps and like breathing behind you, and you're like, but like they say don't turn around. So if you walk forward the whole time, then you make it and you're good. I really like the one where it says I think it says don't open the door, but like at the other end of the train car, there's just a guy banging on the door, and it sounds like he's like yelling for help, and you just have to like wait, and he does that for like a long time, and then eventually it stops and you can go forward. But I do feel like it feels more, I don't know if these are actual like pieces of folklore or whatever, but they do feel a little more kind of like this is like a myth, when you're at home and you hear a guy knocking on your door and you like don't let him in because that's not a guy, that's a demon or something. I like that it feels a little more kind of like folktale-y in that way. But then there is a creepy girl that shows up too many times, and more than once there's like a big eyeball outside the train car, and you're like, okay, I guess that's fun.
Yeah, I liked the eyeball. I thought the eyeball was fucking sick. I was a huge fan of that. The little girl, I don't give a shit about her. She sucks.
I'm trying
the
to
eyeball
think.
rocks.
Yeah, did either of you have ones that stood out that you liked?
The eyeball.
Oh God, when
Uh,
the guy who's usually sitting there is behind you, staring at you through the other train car, and if you walk
yeah.
up to him, he like runs at you and tries to kill you. That's one of the times I died. 'Cause I'm like, what is he doing? He's like, that won't creep me out.
Uh, there's
When
another
the
time.
train
Go ahead.
when the train car started filling with blood, that really got to me. I thought that
I mean,
was
because
like,
that just happens like most weeks in New York.
I'll tell you what, our subways are way worse than this.
If you're like, if I could take a subway
Yeah.
this clean and sometimes there's a creepy little girl, I would do it.
Dude, Sam and me have talked about this before, like how some countries have cushioned subway cars, and I'm like, could you fucking imagine how bad they would be if we had cushions in our subway? Like it would be the foulest thing of all time. And looking at this, I was like, oh, we could be a real country.
Um, I was actually interested in. I'm reading all of them, and I like learned that I kind of did something and I didn't need to. But there's one where you open it, and the passenger sitting there is recording you with his phone, and I immediately like turned away from him and like back down. I was like, oh, I can't show him my face. And apparently you don't need to do anything there, but like that, I really love that they have, they've got the guy who's almost never doing anything, and then sometimes they have him doing things, and just like the subtleness of like he's filming you. I was like, I'm very uncomfortable with this. I don't like that this is happening at all.
I really like that back in the Exit 8 that one of the anomalies is him smiling, or the one where he's looking at you.
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
freak
yeah,
me
yeah.
out. Like a big grin, like almost like a face app grin.
I didn't know
It was exactly like a face app grin. That is such a correct assessment of where it just looked like someone had like drawn a smile on his face.
Mm-hmm.
I did not realize Atlanta had a subway system. That's something I learned today.
Yeah, it's not good. They're spending millions of dollars to upgrade the main station, but like aesthetically. And it'll be shut down for disabled people, like elevator access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of weird, like there's also people keep blocking expansion of it northward because they're racist.
Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah, it's like that. I used to take it all the time.
Wow. I'm a big transit fan, so now I'm just looking at maps of your all's transit system. Sorry, it's bad podcasting.
There's a famous meme video. They were destroying maybe an old stadium or something, they were destroying a big building. Like the demolition was happening, a news camera was set up to record it, and a MARTA bus blocked the camera right at the moment of demolition. It should be easy to find. It's like, I felt bad for the person, but it's really funny.
Well, Blake, this feels like something that you would be into. All of the like unused subway stations in New York, where it's like, it's like, oh, it still exists, and you might even like drive past one while on another route, but like,
okay, so
nothing's going on there.
Here's some famous facts about the New York subway system. The MTA, the bane of my existence. I'm constantly arguing against the MTA. We deserve better systems. However, an interesting thing is the very first New York subway is still there. It was below, I think, the courthouse, right near the end of the Brooklyn Bridge on the Manhattan side. And I can't remember what train, but it uses that station to turn around. So occasionally they open it and do tours, but it's not an in-use subway system. But you can see it every day if you ride whatever train it is to the end, and you'll turn around in it. However, all this is to say, Jacob, we played a game.
Yes.
That had a level in the very first New York subway. The Darkness one has a level set in that subway, which was very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, Shannon, the Darkness is a kind of comic booky game set in like a grimy New York. But it is interesting because you take subways between levels and you have to like figure out how to take the subway. Like you have to like look at signs to get on the right one, and then one of the levels is like, hey, you just got to jump off the platform and like walk into the dark and kind of trust that like there's going to be an unused station there, and there is. And it's really cool.
And it's the very first subway stop in New York. I believe there were a few attempts at a subterranean transit system before that, including one that used wind to blow a train a few stops.
Wind?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's basically like wind propelled. But who someone was not fond of that. What's his name? Doesn't matter. This is bad podcasting. But I think they've since filled in the tunnel, but for a while there was just this unused tunnel with this like prototype train that would go like 3 stops, and it used big wind propulsion to send it down somewhere in Lower Manhattan, I think near the either the courthouse or City Hall. There was an old subway.
That's crazy.
But they shut it down because they wanted to build an elevated train instead, and politics got involved, and now we were robbed of our wind tunnel. What was that thing where they send mail by tube? What are those called?
Pneumatic tube?
Yeah.
That's what it was. It was a pneumatic subway system.
Oh, I was imagining like a big turbine or something.
Yeah, I was like a big fan that was just blowing.
No, it was a pneumatic subway system because I think the guy that designed it was the one who started the pneumatic mail system. There's really interesting history about the pneumatic subway. Listeners at home, please look it up. I'm sure Jacob is looking it up as well right now. We're all having a great time.
It's really interesting.
Did y'all ever watch
dangerous.
that Tom Scott video where he's in the bank that was converted into a restaurant and they send the food through pneumatic tubes?
Oh, that rocks, dude.
And then he put his GoPro in it and you can see it like zoom up and across. It's awesome.
This is considerably less cool, but I was in a restaurant the other day that I guess their kitchen was in the basement, so they had one of those little service elevators for just food, and I was freaking out about this little elevator. I was like, guys, you don't understand. They have an elevator they put your fucking food on, and everybody was like, we gotta stop hanging out with this fucking loser.
I have been trying to think of more places that you could set a game like this, because I think the fun part about it is a very common place. It can be pretty empty, and then you can have variables that you can twist. And I do think that subways are pretty perfect for this kind of thing. But does anywhere else spring to mind?
Having spent so much time in hospital systems, having to be I have an appointment on the first floor in imaging, and then I have a follow-up on the 3rd floor, and just how hopelessly lost you get in giant hospitals, it would be a perfect one because hospitals, you're surrounded by death and disease, so it's already scary in there, and then just trying to navigate one of those, perfect setting.
That would be a really fun setup if you actually did talk to someone at the beginning and they gave you instructions to follow, where it's you check in at the hospital and they're go up and right and take that elevator and then go down this other stairway, and I'm I'm not gonna remember this.
No one that works at a hospital has ever given a good direction in their life.
Yeah.
They always give you the most obscene, absurd, out of control directions that basically should just be hey, walk down this one hallway, but they're but when you pass the chapel, you're going to turn right. And then where there's a guy getting an MRI, you're going to need to do 2 circles around, walk to the Starbucks, order a large coffee. It's yeah, you would just do something asinine like that. It'd be brilliant.
I'm wondering if you could do... Does it have to be a very artificial environment? Could you do a nature one of these? Or is it better if it's the sterility of a subway station or a hospital or whatever?
I think the vibe is just different. It's the Lost Woods in Zelda or something.
Yeah.
Which is a completely different feel versus something that is that sterile and fluorescent lit.
I've brought this up on this podcast before, but Shannon, did you ever play the original Slender game? Before they turned it into a kind of fleshed out Steam game and whatever, and it was just I don't know if it was on itch.io or if it even predated that, but it was just a game that you downloaded from the internet at some point.
Do you find papers in the woods?
Yes.
On trees? I did play that.
Because
I think the original version.
They, at some point they called it, it was just called Slender, and then it was Slender : the 8 pages, and then they did a Steam release of it and whatever. But downloading that original version just off some site and playing it really felt like I had downloaded evil onto my computer. It had some kind of aura where I was playing it, and gameplay wise, it's not really similar to this, but I do remember having the feeling of just being like, I cannot turn my head because like the Slender Man would not appear directly in front of you, and so if you were just walking forward, you were okay, but it's like eventually you were going to have to turn because you needed to like explore the rest of the forest, and then when you turned, he would be like standing there, and it was genuinely terrifying in a way that like I haven't played it since, and I wonder if I could get that original game if it would still have the same feeling.
I was thinking about this last night, like how Silent Hill 2 scared me. So we talked about this on the show. Silent Hill 2 scared me so bad I started convincing myself mechanics existed that didn't. Like if I ran in the apartment, the monsters would hear me, which is not how that game works. Like you can run all day long and it won't. The light though, you can turn your light off and sneak past them, but like there's no
your radio.
Yeah. Like
Static, yeah.
But like it was footsteps that scared me. So I would like walk everywhere, and it made that game probably take 4 hours longer than it needed to because I was so scared of running in interiors. Just kind of similar to what you're saying, Jacob.
No, I think that's actually, I've had that experience too, and it is really cool when like you basically start overestimating a game to its credit, where it has convinced you that it's smart. And so then you're doing things just to be like, oh, well, I mean, they're going to know if I do this or whatever. And it like, whether it's true or not, it makes that probably made the game more compelling for you. So like, cool.
Well, it did. And to be fair, Silent Hill 2 is a smart game usually. So it's like, it makes it. Sam yesterday was like, he's just going to find out he's been dead the whole time or it was a dream, right? And I was like, no, luckily the game is smarter than that. There's no twist like that.
It's a lot more upsetting.
Yeah, it's actually way worse.
What's happened with him and this whole deal?
Yeah, actually, unfortunately, this is all real, and that's the worst thing that could ever happen. It's not just a dream at the end.
Are y'all tabletop people?
Like, not really.
There's a really interesting tabletop role-playing game called 10 Candles, where the game works mechanically. You sit in a dark room and you physically light 10 candles. And as you play, all the characters die. It's like a dark horror game. So you burn your character sheets and like put them in a bowl or whatever in the middle of the table. But something that I am so obsessed with about that game is that if candles are accidentally blown out, then they're just out. Like you lose some of your life. So you don't want to move. You don't want to laugh. You don't want to like.
That's really cool.
Physically, you're in a dark room. It's terrifying, especially if you have a good GM. And yeah, it's such a physical experience that affects you so much emotionally playing it, which is kind of similar in games where it's like you don't want to move too much or do certain things, but like in such a changeable, it's such a cool game. Yeah, I would recommend it.
That's
actually Manhunt did the footsteps thing, which is kind of like the first Manhunt's kind of horror adjacent, and you had to watch your footsteps in that game, which was pretty interesting.
Have y'all ever been to a play, like a theatrical production that really scared you? Because I've been to a couple, and it's cool, like because you're like in a room and like everyone's scared. But I once saw, gosh, I mean, I think it was like just a school production of the Agatha Christie, I think, 10 Little Indians, which is not a politically correct name, but like is a, it's And Then There Were None is the book, but it's oh gosh, and it's good.
The original title.
The original title is way worse. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, in any case, it is a play where like people are in a house and they're all being killed off. And they had on stage like 10 kind of figurines. Blake just saw the original title. 10 figurines representing like each of the characters. And like throughout the play, you would just notice that like one had gone missing, and then you would realize that that person wasn't on stage, and you'd be like, oh fuck, and you could kind of get ahead of it by like realizing that they died. And then the characters would eventually realize it, but like it was an incredibly high tension environment, and it reminded me of that game that you were describing, Shannon, with the candles. That's which is awesome. Like it is situations in which you can make people scared communally in real life are like very cool. And I've never gone to like a real haunted house, and I know that there are
Oh, I was
some of
about to say,
those.
I did a little one of my favorite video essays I worked on is like a history of haunted houses, like haunted house attractions in the US and like why they started and whatever. Netherworld in Atlanta is like one of the best ones in the world. So, and it's pretty cheap to get into.
What do they, yeah,
I
what do
love
they
haunted
do there?
houses. It's just like high production value. There's like the bigger house, a smaller house, and you can get into both of them for like $30, I think. And they have escape rooms now in a little museum I went into with my friends with their old like Lovecraft. Every year they have a different theme
Okay, I was gonna
to
ask, yeah, so do they set up
change
like
it.
a story?
Yeah, I mean it's not going to be anything particularly deep, but typically there's like a theme. Or I've been to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal, and so there's like I went to the like Poltergeist house, the Trick or Treat haunted house, but those are more sort of conga line style where they rush you through. Now, and one thing I really liked about Netherworld too, when you're standing outside in line, there are people who come to try to scare you, and when you're inside, there are people who are in character who you can talk to and kind of learn a little bit about the story or whatever. There was like a weird guy with a broom we were talking to when we went pre-COVID. But yeah, I love haunted houses. But I like, ever since I was a little kid, I like getting like right up at the front of the group and like really going hard in it. I'm really into those.
That's
Some
awesome.
people can't handle it. They'll like punch the worker. Like my mom worked I think my mom and my cousin both worked like church haunted houses when they were young. And my mom got kicked in the face and my cousin got punched because people have no self-control too, which sucked. Because they went like, ah, and so a stranger just like punched my cousin, who's like a 5'3" woman. It was crazy.
There's a really interesting a video essay that I love by do you know Laura Crone? Shannon or Blake? Either of you?
Yes.
Blake is nodding.
Yes.
Laura Crone, who is a friend, has been on like streams before, has one about like working in haunted houses and basically realizing, like, thinking that you are up for it right until you get into the haunted house, because like you've never actually been put in that sort of situation before, so you don't know how your body is going to react like until you're there. And then she uses it as a very kind of clever like metaphor for talking about like consent and kind of a number of different like situations that you might run into. But
That's
like
cool.
I really like the idea of like, well, yeah, people might think that they're like super ready for this because like you've never actually been in a haunted house with like a guy with a chainsaw before. So like you might throw a punch because like this is not a situation that your brain has had to deal with before now.
It's scary. When they're done well, you'll be like in a dark room trying to feel your way through, and they'll be shooting air at you and all sorts of weird, like especially the higher budget ones are really cool.
There's
So it
also
is. But I mean,
go ahead.
don't punch anybody though.
Don't punch
You know?
anyone. There's
Yeah.
there's that Nathan For You episode where he's like, we're gonna get pressed by making you think you're actually going to die going to the haunted house, but then it's like he's like, they're in the haunted house and then they pull the people out and they're like, someone in there had some kind of infectious disease and they coughed on you and so you would have got it, and they like take them to a hospital. Great stuff. Do we have anything more to say about the Exit 8 or Platform 8?
One thing. I found that they released merch for the Exit 8.
Yeah.
And they have pillows, and they call them scare cushions, which I think is really funny.
That's fantastic. I like the eyeball one. I see where you linked it.
So if you need a scare cushion, there you go. That's it. That's all I had to say. I think scare cushion's a funny phrase. I think we should use it more often.
I do think there is, and I think this is probably more present in Exit 8 than Platform 8, there is certainly something that this game is doing with the idea of like mass surveillance, which I think is interesting. Like there are a number of things that are like, this camera is on, that's a difference, or the surveillance thing is actually watching you or whatever. And again, it's like, I don't know if the game is intentionally making any sort of statement on that, but I do think that it's, you know, it is certainly interesting. It is something that I've been thinking about a lot with all the like new kind of protest laws. I hope there's not something like this happening in Georgia, though they might be, but like North Carolina is like basically banning masks for reasons of like wanting to identify protesters more easily. And so having part of the scare of this game being like, yeah, you're being watched like all the time by every angle, I do think is like, I think it's interesting, and I think it adds to the uneasy feeling.
Oh, we've got Cop City and people being given bogus charges for protesting that, but I don't think we have any mass bans yet.
Knock
One
on wood.
comparison, yeah, not God, good Lord, I don't want to last fall maybe I was at like a periodontist office and a lady at the front desk made fun of me for wearing a mask. It was like a tiny little room, and I was like, this is weird. Culturally, this is weird. Um, One comparison I forgot to make with the Exit 8 was Papers, Please, because my short-term memory is so bad, and like trying to remember all the different
Oh,
little things that you
sure.
have to as you're approved. I mean, like it's such a different game, tonally, visually, everything. But I think I just had to quit playing Papers, Please pretty like soon, and because I was like, I can't, I'm too dumb. I can't remember all this stuff. With this game, I think it was actually easier. There were just like maybe less factors to remember. If I could remember the 6 posters, this, I was fine. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to make. I thought like that's the only good game I had played previously that was sort of a spot the difference game. I remember all these different aspects as you're
I
interacting with these
I
people.
think that's a really good comparison, because there is this thing that indie games do way more often than kind of big ones, where it's just kind of like their focus is so narrow, and it's just kind of like, get Papers, Please is the ultimate, like, just get good at this one thing, and that's the
Mhm.
whole game. And this is kind of similar, versus any kind of shooter where it's like, okay, you gotta shoot a giant in his glowing orange weak point. It's like, just understanding like how to stamp a passport, or like the specific shape of this one hallway is really cool.
Mhm.
um well, I think that's it. Shannon, please tell our listeners what you've got going on, where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Plenty of Alcoves and on YouTube at Strucci Movies. If you type in like fake friends parasocial, I'll come up. I'm working on a video essay about the musician Nick Let's Go and like artist protests and Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone and a bunch of other stuff that I've been working on for like a year that I hope to finish. I'm a player on the Southern Gothic dark comedy horror podcast Oddity Roadshow. And check if you're a One Piece fan, check out the Fight Together miniseries on the One Piece podcast where we have like a episode on colonialism, we have episodes on like queer and trans stuff. That has been really fun. We haven't done it in a minute, but that's been really fun to do.
You have been there have been many people in my life who've I have seen start getting into One Piece and then be like, oh shit, this is really the thing. But I feel like I have been most persuaded by seeing your tweets of being like, all right, one day I'm gonna take the plunge on this.
I started reading it 21 years
Oh
ago.
my
I was
god.
like 12. It's been such a formative thing it's the only thing I liked when I was 12. Like I'll play the Pokemon games maybe, whatever. I'm not as interested in them, but like One Piece it's still good too. I have so many friends that have like tattoos of it who it's like change your life kind of thing. Yeah, I love it.
That's I had a friend I was at a baseball game with recently, and he like pulled me aside and he was like, I've started watching One Piece. And I was like, are you okay? And he's like, I haven't done anything else for the past like 3 weeks.
It's also this is a whole aside, but like when I was a kid, it was the dorky one out of the big three with like Naruto and Bleach because the 4 Kids stuff was so bad. But now it's like Megan Thee Stallion was dressed as a One Piece character in her new music in Boa. Like she's dressed as Boa Hancock, and like Olympic athletes have been doing poses from the show, and like big soccer stuff. It's like so cool to see it get I don't know wider recognition with like I don't know, with grown-ups, and I'm not like a cringe 12-year-old with my little pirate cartoon, God, it's so good.
It is just cool that like people who like things as kids get older and they keep liking those things. That it's
Hmm.
like it's not like the culture just spontaneously decided like One Piece is cool now. It's just like they've also been reading it for 20 years. And so now that they're like
Yeah.
30 and don't have to be like embarrassed of their interests, they can be like, yeah, I've been into this thing for a really long time.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, that's it for this episode of Something Rotten. Thank you all for listening. We'll be doing our Nebula bonus episode and a Q&A on this, and then we'll figure out what the hell we're doing next season, which Blake and I, we aren't even sure yet.
Oh yeah, I have an idea.
You've got an idea?
You have an idea.
Oh, that's true. Well,
and listeners, if you want to hear that, nebula.tv/somethingrottenpodcast, give me some fucking money.
Yeah, we'll see. And that's it. Until next time, everyone, please check those doorknobs to make sure they are not in the middle of the door. And if they are, turn right around.
You gotta turn around.
Air cushion. Bye.